Hello, my name is Nick Bright, scholar of East Asian religions.
And I'm Proven Paradox, a guy with a lot of questions.
And you're listening to Bright on Buddhism, a podcast where we discuss East Asian Buddhism, answering listener-submitted questions from listeners just like you, and introducing concepts of Buddhism that you may or may not be familiar with in a casual, conversational setting. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Bright on Buddhism. This week we have a special guest, Hye, to talk about Korean Buddhism. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Hye. I am a colleague of Nick's at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and we're both heavily involved in the East Asian Languages and Cultures Department and study a lot of Buddhism together.
Yeah, so today we'll be asking you about how you understand Korean Buddhism.
Absolutely.
How the field understands Korean Buddhism. How the West understands New Agey self-helpy Buddhism, and how Buddhism might function in your own life.
For sure.
So I think that I will get us started. So,
go for it.
Let's see. What is your understanding of contemporary Korean religion in general? Not just Buddhism, but kind of all of it.
That's a good question. So the word religion wasn't even really part of the Korean language for a long time. I can't remember specifically when it was introduced, but it was around the 1900s. So religious life in Korea has largely been like ancestral veneration, and then that ancestral veneration became heavily Confucianized, and then there was some Buddhist syncretism, obviously. And then the Christian conversions started happening, and now a lot of Koreans, I'm sure if you ask them, consider themselves Christians. But in their daily life, a lot of them probably still have a Buddhist shrine in their house, or visit Buddhist temples, or even do the Jaesa, which is the yearly ancestral altar of food offerings.
It's super interesting. So It sounds like there's kind of a melting pot of indigenous religions, Confucianism, maybe even some Taoism, and some Buddhism, and then Western religions that kind of came in, maybe due to imperialism and colonialism.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's super fascinating. And so, as a follow-up question, not to skip ahead or anything, but how do you think that religion functions kind of in Korea, as it might be different from how it functions in the West?
Well, I'll go ahead and slightly amend that to like Korea versus maybe like the diaspora Korean Americans. So I think like in Korea, I'm not actually sure. I probably should have done some more Googling of statistics before this, but from what I understand, there's still a large percentage that considers themselves Buddhist. A lot of them consider themselves Christian. I think for like on a daily religious life basis, a lot of people going to visit shamans for fortune telling and stuff like that is sometimes overlooked parts of religious life. I think for Korean Americans, Korean diaspora, and this goes for most of the West outside of Korean culture as well, as we're a lot of atheists. A lot of us are becoming atheists. I think for the first time in history, over 50% of Americans identify as non-religious. So that's definitely a trend, and I think that kind of coincides because Buddhism is a very non-religious religion, so something that interests me.
It certainly can be a non-religious religion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so, if you don't mind me skipping ahead a bit, that kind of dovetails into one of the other questions we wanted to ask. So, how do you understand New Age / self-help Buddhism, and how does that influence your understanding of Buddhism today?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm going to steal a metaphor from a yogi that I listen to on TikTok, and she's basically describing Western yoga versus like the ancestral yoga that she practices. And she's like, well, you take one pea and you hold that up and you say, this is a samosa. It's not a samosa. It's one part of the samosa. So I think that honestly is the same for Buddhism. I see the appropriation of a lot of these terms like karma and stuff like that. And it's like, well, have you ever even read a sutra, and, no offense, but it's just kind of interesting how things have become like watered down almost and commodified in a lot of ways.
That's something that we talk about a lot on here is like I have no personal issue with people who buy into what you might think of truly genuinely as being profit-driven Buddhism that is basically like this Buddhism that's interpreted and mistranslated in self-helpy books for a purpose not of giving a clear picture of what East Asian religion is, but for the purpose of, making the reader feel a certain kind of way. And
in that process, selling books,
Exactly.
selling tickets to retreats, selling seminars or whatever.
And I don't have a problem with that, but I think that part of what I want to do here is buyer beware. That is something that is 150 years old maximum. And if you really want Buddhism, you have to go to the texts, you have to go longer, you have to see a lot of things that might not be congruent with your current view of what Buddhism really is and what it looks like and what Buddhists do. And people will say things like there is no proselytizing in Buddhism, but you and I learned in class there absolutely can be.
There absolutely can be. And my thing is like, there's a history behind it. Like you'll see some of the New Age Buddhists and they'll have like the Buddha heads, and that always it makes me feel physical pain to see that, because the history is that the reason Buddha heads became so popular is because when temples got raided, the statues were too big to loot in their entirety, so they decapitated them. And that's something you tell a New Age Buddhist, they're like, but it just goes with my aesthetic. And that's not all of them. I'm not trying to like homogenize people, but I think that just like clinging to that ignorance, and I think that if the New Age Buddhism made that small effort to be more culturally aware, that it really wouldn't be that difficult,
And I think that people would learn a lot and actually get a lot more out of it.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Because I think that New Agey Buddhism, because you have to do a lot of erasure in order to get it, people are reading into it stuff that's not there and reading in their own crap into it. And like I said, whatever works for people, and I'm not here to tell them that, the thing that helps them sleep at night is wrong. But I'm here to tell them that,
there's more.
Understand that it is a pea and not a samosa. Exactly.
Well, so what is your understanding so karma to you? It's not like, oh, I was mean to someone and that's why I got in a fender bender. Like that's obviously not karma. So how would you understand karma?
Yeah, we talk about we recently, the two of us have been talking either with our other guest appearances or in other contexts. We talk a lot about, karma is not just so simple as what goes around comes around. There's certainly there is a individual aspect to it. Like your bad actions lead to bad retribution, but it's much less self-based and much less contained in finite time. So there is no such thing as my karma, your karma, because of non-self. If I don't have a substantial individual persistent rebirthing self, then it's not my karma, it's our karma.
Exactly.
And also if I do something bad, it leads to bad experiences and bad actions in the rest of the world. And additionally, it's also not an immediate thing. I was mean to someone this morning, so this afternoon I had a car accident. That's not how it works at all.
Exactly. And I've had people try to claim that stuff before. It always makes me laugh, because I'm like, well, the idea of an individual karma is kind of narcissistic, isn't it?
It replicates a delusion of self.
Exactly.
Karma is kind of really showing you you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's that's spicy. I like that. I've never heard it put so succinctly before.
What do you think about it, Docs?
Yeah, like we've talked about, between the idea of non-self, between the idea of interconnectivity and impermanence, we should be thinking of karma on a societal level, perhaps, maybe a species level, maybe all sentient life. Like
a sentient being level.
You don't have karma because you are impermanent. So it's a collective idea of karma.
It's like an organism, and each organ is accruing its own karma, but that karma is still coextensive with the karma of the whole organism. And it determines rebirth stations a lot. It determines what happens to you when you die in some respects. And that alone takes away the finite time aspect of it. people can't do something bad right now and have something bad happen right after.
Exactly.
And then, it's not like a +1, -1 type of situation. It's much more complicated and long-term than that. And, unfortunately, we've talked about how Buddhism might have a problem here, is that it kind of blames people who are suffering from what might be out of their control, like disability or illness or poverty. And the Buddhists kind of will say, well, you should have been better in a past life.
That reminds me of someone who thinks that people that have peanut allergies in this life were bad people in a past life. Yeah. I've heard that theory.
I have a spine injury that's basically genetic, and I don't like that idea of, well, it's your fault, but you weren't you then. I wasn't me in that past life. So I think the common concept of karma is there to try to make the world seem fair, but it fails at that because it's not fair.
Yeah.
Fair is a complete imaginary human invention. It's not, we're not looking at the world and seeing it and putting it on. We're looking at the world and not seeing it and putting it on.
Right. But it's a very comforting idea. So, people are going to cling to it. And there we go. That's clinging again.
Yeah, that's desire and attachment. And Buddhism says we don't want that. Buddhism says that we should move away from that as much as we can.
Cut those cords.
Exactly, cut those attachments. So, how does Buddhism and Korean religion in this syncretic whole that we've talked about function in your own life as much as you're willing to share?
Oh, absolutely. So I am also training as a Korean shaman right now in my indigenous religion. And there's...
Oh, cool.
Thank you. Yeah, there's so much overlap. Like if you look at pictures on Instagram of a Buddhist temple and the fruit offerings they put out, and then a picture of like a shaman ritual, it's like the same arrangement, same rules. We have this rule that we can't offer fruits with a pit because I'm of the peach story from Buddhism. It's hubris to offer the pitted fruit back to the ancestors. A lot of Mudang will worship the Kuan Yin as a shaman goddess. There's been a lot of syncretism there. And then the daily practice of most Mudang is doing 108 Buddhist prostrations first thing in the morning. So... yeah, really, there's like literally
108.
So much. It's good for the abs, my only exercise over lockdown. Like,
that's really interesting. And so you do ritual services for people in the community as well, right?
Yes, I do. Yes.
That's fascinating. So what are the kinds of jobs that people will approach you with to try and have you do?
Well, so far, I've kind of been nichified, is that the word? As an exorcism specialist. So typically for Korean shamans, and I know Buddhist exorcism is a thing too, or one of our professors has told us stories, but Koreans like to make sure that you've gone to every doctor, gotten every answer possible, and that, the shaman isn't the first place you see because it's always kind of a last-ditch effort. And I think there is a lot of overlooked and slept on, like, placebo benefit to just the formality and pomp and circumstance of a ritual. And I think often for a person to kind of get to be the center of that, like, ritual and get to take part in that is... like 99% of the healing process. It's 1% me stabbing spirits, So
right,
yeah.
That 1% though.
That 1% is fun to watch. I'll admit. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And so, what is some of the doctrine that leads into this exorcism? And I ask that because, like, the Buddhist doctrine, I can talk about that, but I'm interested to see what because Korean religion is unique. It's truly unique in East Asia. I'm curious to see how that might differ or how that might be.
What do you mean by doctrine of it?
So I guess if there is an exorcism ritual, there has to be demons or some sort of
yeah. So
and how does one become, or where do they come from? What do they do?
They're just hungry ghosts, like people that died, didn't get a proper burial, people that drowned and like did their body. If your body in Korea, there's a superstition: if you drown and your body isn't found within 3 days, you become a hungry ghost. Like there's thousands of ways you can become a hungry ghost.
But it is hungry ghost in the sense of the Buddhist.
Yes, actually, yes, it's a hungry ghost in the sense of the Buddhist term.
Nice.
Yeah. So then what happens is enough of those kind of become attached to you, and you get like hwabyong, just like heart sickness or like some sort of byung is like the suffix that is added on, meaning illness in Korea. So it'll either be like a stomach sickness or heart sickness from like spirits that we'll typically diagnose, so to speak.
And it's also bad luck as well, right? So like I've also heard that maybe if you're not physically sick, but you know, technology breaks anytime you walk into a room or something.
Yeah.
I mentioned that because Japanese religion has something that's quite similar, and it sounds like it's an interesting connection that not only your like physical health, but just the circumstances of your daily life, if they're going super, super badly and there really is no way to explain it and it doesn't feel random, that's kind of where it sounds like that's where a shaman will come in and help, be able to help in some way.
It'll be like someone's like, I've been to the, you know, kidney doctor, I've been to the endocrinologist, thyroid doctor, you know, it's kind of helped, but I'm still dealing with this, and I've also got this really bad depression. Like, that's a common story I get for people that are wanting that type of ritual. But yeah, the Hungry Ghost is definitely another Buddhist connection.
So you mentioned before that one of the possible symptoms of being haunted by hungry ghosts is technology messing up?
Yeah, that can be one.
Yeah.
Can I get an exorcism?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, with the prior information of the genetic illness and then the technology, that's enough for me to do an exorcism.
Oh, yeah. I suspect that if I were to speak like, you know, we recently appeared on another podcast that should be going up, and the host of that podcast mentioned that he has an old what did he say? His astrologer, I believe. An old school Buddhist guy who would absolutely look at my situation and say, "Hey, this is because of bad karma. You're clearing out bad karma."
Oh, see, for us, it would just For us, it would just be, you just got some bad spirits attached to you, some bad ancestors, like maybe. Yeah, it wouldn't be as much your fault, I think, in a way. That makes sense. Yeah,
it's interesting that those possessions don't. And I say possessions as in like, you know, a hungry ghost attaching to you. It seems like that doesn't seem like it's karmic retribution in the conventional sense of like karmic retribution being, you know, being born with not enough anything. You know, it's very fascinating.
That's another thing. What was I going to say? The Buddhists and the shamans used to work together for locating where graves should go. Like,
interesting.
So Buddhists, they were geomancers oftentimes, Buddhist monks. And then the geomancers would help the shamans locate like the auspicious location for a family's grave.
Wow. And how would they do that?
Cool.
A type of divination that I don't think exists anymore, sadly. Yeah.
I'm curious because in the West, those who are familiar with like maybe neo-pagan traditions or with something like that, they might think of like divining rods, you know.
Oh, the dowsing rods. Dude, that'd be
that's
funny.
what I was thinking as well.
For some reason, I picture like throwing of coins or stones or some sort of thing, I know there might be some like cloud divination that's done or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I think I've read about cloud divination where they look and depending on the shape of the cloud. That kind of determines like, okay, well, that's not a good direction to face, or that is not, we shouldn't be under here, or something like that.
It's very Avatar, The Last Airbender.
Yeah, very much so. Very interesting.
It's a surprising amount of accuracy in that show.
There is so much accuracy in that show. Actually,
I need to actually watch that sometime.
I highly recommend it.
It's very good.
Sometimes I act like my interest in East Asia kind of came out of nowhere, but other times I kind of remember that whenever I was younger, I was watching that show all the time, and I'm like, maybe it was like unconsciously pushing me towards that. For most of my life, because it's super interesting. I was super into it when I was younger, and it's on Netflix now, which is very good.
It is, and so is Korra, The Legends of Korra, the spinoff of it.
Yeah, that one's really good too. So when it comes to Buddhist monks working with geomancers and with shamans and stuff, it sounds like there's a lot of syncretism going on there. And I wonder how you understand that syncretism, at least in terms of the function of, I don't want to go over questions we've asked already, but at least in terms of the function of ritual doers on the ground in real life. Because syncretism is not something that Westerners are used to kind of accepting. Our Western religions are very exclusive. And,
they like to pretend to be.
And they're not in reality, and they're definitely not in East Asia.
Yeah, they're definitely not. I think syncretism is great. It's a way to peacefully coexist with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, even the Christmas tree is syncretism. You know, isn't that from the Yule log? Like, there's so much syncretism that's just kind of like, oh, we don't talk about prunes. No, sorry, I just watched Encanto last night. It's like,
no, it's true. Like, we don't talk
about syncretism.
It's very true.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. I think that syncretism is something that Buddhism is uniquely attuned to and able to do. And I think that that leads to a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, it's in that way, Chinese Buddhism, Korean Buddhism, and Japanese Buddhism, we can look at connections between all of them and similarities between all of them. But there's also a lot of stuff we can find that's unique and individual to each kind of culture and each kind of place.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting to study.
I think the ability of Buddhism to syncretize so easily is why a lot of East and Southeast Asians were able to hold on to that when Christians started coming and converting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, more so than like the pagan religions, because Buddhism's a little bit sneakier. It's a little bit more in the home, you know?
Well, it might be because...
Yeah, if you're not monastic. Yeah, if you're not monastic, yeah.
It might be a non-religious religion, too. I mean...
I think it is.
In that sense, I think that speaks to how religion functions differently in the West versus in East Asia. Is like, whenever Buddhists look at something and say something about it, they're not... It's kind of like... I don't want to say that they're diagnosing reality, because all religions are attempting to do that, but they're doing it in a way that doesn't necessarily seem so like value charged and so exclusive and so black and white and so forceful and beat you over the head with it as Western religions can do. Whenever Buddhism looks around and says that all life is suffering, it's just because it is.
It is, yeah.
But whenever like whenever Western religions look and say there's this all of this stuff we can't explain is just God, that's a very highly contestable claim, and contestable in the sense that like you can debate about it for 3,000 years.
Exactly.
You can't really debate about life being suffering for 3,000 years.
I know, and I think the focus on like the afterlife, whereas in Buddhism it's just kind of like, let's focus on, you know, in this life not being as much suffering, right?
Right.
Very real.
I'd also say that a lot of Western religious observations are prescriptive rather than descriptive, whereas Buddhist observations tend to be very descriptive.
Yeah, that's a good observation. I definitely agree.
I would say it's the exact same, yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. Do you have any questions? Did we get to all of them, Paradox?
I'm curious about more things that are unique to Korean religion. So like, what are some things that you're only going to find in Korea that are really cool?
Well, there's a lot that you'll find in Korea that Koreans do in their own way, but like spirit trees, which you'll find also in Japan and Shintoism.
Yeah.
I mean, Koreans do it in their own unique way, but that's also seen in Japan. What else? Like the ancestral altars, food offerings. Man, see, I'm always so proud of Korean culture, but now I'm like trying to think of something that's like only Korean. I would say the types. So the chakdu, riding the chakdu blades. So Korean shamans, we balance a lot of things. That's my joke to people. It's like it's a religion of balancing things. So to make sure the gods are happy, we put a pig head on a trident and make it balance on its end.
Oh my gosh.
To symbolize the final step of a shaman's initiation, and I have not done this part yet, so Don, don't look at me like I'm that cool. But the final step is to dance barefoot on blades, on two open blades, balancing on top of a platform.
I've seen that. I've seen people do that before.
Yeah,
it's basically a matter of like being very careful to not slide the skin across the blade.
Absolutely.
And, like, if you just step on top of it, it's not going to.
I've seen shamans jump on them.
Oh wow. Okay.
I know it's like, because I know like walking across hot coals, like there's a science to it, right? There's like sword swallowers, you know, those people. But I've seen shamans do some out of pocket stuff and just get off the blades and they're fine.
Wow.
And I don't think I'll ever be one that jumps. but we'll see. Maybe someday you'll see me fully possessed by a war general god jumping on 2 open blades.
You have to call Guan Yin first.
Yeah,
you have to call Guan Yin.
No, you have to call the Tongun for that, actually.
Oh, the Tongun, to protect your feet from getting sliced up.
Yeah. Guan Yin would be there if I accidentally cut my feet off.
Guan Yin's there to help you when you're crying and injured. And
exactly,
upset
right.
Couldn't do the right. But yeah, that's really fascinating. I've never seen that. I'll have to actually look and see if I can find that.
I'll send you some YouTube videos. Yeah, I love everything.
Send them to me as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you some. There's some good.
We should just link them in the description.
Link them in the description of this episode.
Oh yeah, so I have a good video. It's not me, but it's a Korean shaman doing an exorcism, and then I have some good videos of the actual knife dancing, which is fun. Yeah. So
yeah, I want to see all of that.
For sure. Absolutely.
And I'm sure the listeners will want to see that too, because Korean religion gets overlooked so much in scholarship and in culture. You know, people, it's all Japanese and Chinese. It's not, Korean gets kind of skipped because it's kind of the place where it's not a destination. People are either going to Japan or going to China, one way or the other.
Or they're going to a BTS concert in Seoul. Like it's not for the
it's not for the religion. It's not for, and so
for sure.
We're always interested to hear more about the places that get overlooked.
Yeah, well, if you know anything about Shintoism, Korean shamanism is kind of like a feral Shintoism in a way. Yeah, like the untamed wild.
We'll have to talk about Shintoism some more on the show, because
for sure.
At first, we were trying to keep things as kind of hermetically sealed between traditions as we could, so that we could come to fully understand. Yeah. But we're getting to the point now where you can't talk about Japanese Buddhism without talking about Shinto. You can't talk about Chinese Buddhism without Taoism. And I'm sure in Korea, you can't talk about Korean Buddhism without shamanism. Shamanism.
Absolutely.
Or Confucianism.
Yeah. And Confucianism
for sure. Let's do another episode sometime.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'd be down with that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on and answering all of our super personal questions.
This has been fun, and what you've been talking about sounds really cool to me.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on another time for more Korean religion, for more Confucianism, and for more hanging out.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. This has been Hye talking about Korean religions. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
My name is Nick Bright, scholar of East Asian religions and the voice of Hearer.
And I'm Docs, editor, question asker, and voice of Hermit.
And this has been Bright on Buddhism. Thank you for listening. If you like our podcast, or if you have a question you'd like us to discuss, we'd love to hear from you. Please consider leaving a comment or review, subscribing, or joining us on social media. Email us at bright.on.buddhism@gmail.com. Tweet us at brightbuddhism. And join us on our Discord server, The Hidden Sangha, link in description. As always, citations and resources for this episode can be found in the show notes. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you very much.